Was it the pandemic or government policy that disrupted the world?
I think those things are deeply intertwined. I think the pandemic was hugely disruptive. I think the government.
The pandemic didn't shut down businesses. The pandemic didn't shut down flights. The pandemic didn't fire people. The government did.
Yeah, and the pandemic killed millions and millions of people. And without the interventions that slowed transmission, that flattened the curve, as it were.
Really? That has been debunked by now.
Was it just 2 weeks to flatten the curve or 2 years? How about in Wuhan? Do you know if there's still manufacturing or viruses out there? You don't know? Don't you think that's sort of an important thing to know?
What have we learned from COVID?
I don't want to continue the interview.
But don't you think you have an obligation for some sort of transparency? I mean, this is very important things that affect a lot of people.
Happy to do a scheduled interview if you guys want to contact our communications team.
I'm a little bit skeptical about that. I don't think you would. I think you would. I mean, you've come to a reclusive, exclusive community here of businessmen and the elites. It's not very transparent. For example, who have you met with? Will that list be made public?
Do you refuse to do walking interviews like the rest of them because you need a script? It needs to be media that's approved, ones that you can control what they're going to put out, and you've got to be prepared. Like, don't you know the answers? This is your job.
Or is it that the journalists don't have the approved script, and you prefer to deal with journalists who are on the official narrative?
What can we expect from Disease X? More silence? Less transparency?
I think the way that a lot of people at WEF are talking about Disease X is they're excited. They want another lockdown. They want more vax mandates. Pharmaceutical bosses want more sales. I think that's what's scared people, is they see the glee that people are talking about the inevitability of Disease X. Do you dispute that?
I don't think there's glee about the inevitability of Disease X. I think there is a concern that
How much money did you make through COVID?
I'll finish your question.
Please do. There's not glee, there's a concern that what?
There is a concern that the world that we live in increases risk for outbreaks of disease, and that there is a need to be prepared for future disease outbreaks so that they don't spread and become pandemics. So we have to have a conversation about what preparedness entails. Disease X is simply the name that WHO has given to the idea that there will be future outbreaks. I mean, we can't stop future outbreaks.
But why should we trust the WHO when they got everything wrong with regards to COVID, from mask mandates to the effectiveness of the vaccines, which then essentially forced policy across the world, including lockdowns and vaccine mandates?
There have been disease outbreaks for thousands of years. Are you saying there's going to be no more disease outbreaks?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's not the question. The question is, why should we trust the WHO, and why should we rely on people like you?
You asked me about a term that WHO employed. I'm just saying it's a term. It's simply a way of encapsulating a concept.
Of instilling fear into the community, into the world, to get people on the same page, to get governments on the same page, a bit like what they do at the WEF, to bring everybody to consolidate power.
Well, let me ask you, are you asking similar questions to people about climate change?
Absolutely.
And do you think climate change is not real?
That's not the point. I think that it's very suspicious that you're all coming here to preach about what we need to do for global warming, but this is not a very sustainable place, is it?
Whether there's risks for climate or risks for viruses, it always seems the same solution: authoritarianism. Now they're talking about climate lockdowns, 15-minute cities, ultra-low emission zones.
What is a 15-minute city? I don't.
It's not
You
your area,
can't travel far. My point is, people see that COVID was used as an excuse to take away our civil liberties. And that's what's got Davos excited. Not the virus itself, but the opportunity for more authoritarianism.
I think we do need to look at the COVID experience, and we do need to understand the interventions that we use. We need to learn from the experience. A lot of it was suboptimal, but
Like they just made up the 6-foot separation rule. They made it up. They just admitted that.
well, let me finish my comment. So unfortunately, I mean, we had the unfortunate experience of a pandemic. Governments responded as best they could with the limited information that they had. It is absolutely incumbent on us to understand what we went through, to learn the lessons, to draw conclusions about how best to prepare for the next outbreak, because there will be future outbreaks.
Do you believe really the governments did the best that they could with the information they had?
I believe that there were government officials who were trying to make the best decisions possible in a crisis situation.
No, I'm sure there were some good ones, but generally, are you saying that it wasn't a power grab on many governments at many levels around the world, using information from the WHO and other epidemiology experts?
Honestly, I'm not in a position to judge the behavior of every government and the different responses that were employed.
But you're here to talk about preparedness for the next one. Don't you think that means you should analyse how the information you're giving to governments has an effect on the average person, not the people here in WEF. They're safe. They can do whatever they want. They were free during COVID. They were still making money. It's the average Joe around the world that paid the price of the decisions that came out of here and came out of organisations like yours and the WHO.
I mean, our organization, to be clear, focuses on supporting the development of vaccines. So
how do you think that went in COVID?
I think vaccines were developed in record time against an emerging global threat that disrupted the world for 2 years, and I think that it would have disrupted.
Was it the pandemic or government policy that disrupted the world?
I think those things are deeply intertwined. I think the pandemic was hugely disruptive. I think the government.
The pandemic didn't shut down businesses. The pandemic didn't shut down flights. The pandemic didn't fire people. The government did.
Yeah, and the pandemic killed millions and millions of people, and without the interventions that slowed transmission, that flattened the curve, as it were.
Really? That's just been
After
debunked
2 weeks,
by now.
was it just 2 weeks to flatten the curve, or 2 years?
I think our goal is to accelerate vaccine development in the future and to ensure that we can deliver safe and effective vaccines even more rapidly than we did in 2020. And by shortening the period of time for vaccine development, you potentially shorten any period of disruption. You reduce the overall mortality, you reduce the economic impact. I think the world has to be prepared to respond to future infectious diseases in a way that minimizes the huge societal impact that they can have.
Is there anyone in the entire industry that's promoting a non-authoritarian response? Bill Gates, who's the chief funder of the vaccine movement, believes there are too many people in the world. He's an authoritarian who calls for lockdowns, and he really is an oligarch in the worst meaning of the word. Is there anyone on the side of individual rights and civil liberties in the whole movement?
I think so. I mean, I think that there are a number of people. I mean, everyone is concerned to reduce the impact of infectious diseases, and we need, as I said, to understand the experience that we've had. There are inquiries going on in several countries. There's not one in the United States. I think there should be.
There's no real inquiries. They're all for show. The world can see that. They're not really looking at the. When you mention safe and effective vaccines, do you think we achieved that in COVID?
I think the vaccines that we developed.
Yes or no? Safe and effective. COVID.
Were safe and effective and reduced the overall mortality of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, when we talk about effective, they promised us that it will stop the spread. It turned out, and they based mandates on that. It didn't do that.
Were they actually vaccines?
The vaccines modified the disease and reduced the mortality associated with the disease. So they definitely reduced the impact and of the virus on society.
It's not really a vaccine, then, it's a therapy.
They did not ultimately reduce transmission. This is where we're going to have to end,
Thanks for talking
folks.
with us. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'm here in Davos, Switzerland with a team of 6 journalists from Rebel News. You may remember last year we managed to scrum the CEO of Pfizer and Greta Thunberg and other people who want to control your life. We might even bump into the chief of BlackRock, Larry Fink. If you think our journalism is interesting and important, please go to WEFreports.com. All our videos will be there. And if you can, please chip in a few bucks to crowdfund our economy class airfare to get here.